Hi everyone. Today I'll be presenting my self-reflection project, which is going to talk about some verbal communication tendencies and some nonverbal communication tendencies that I have. So starting with verbal tendencies. There are some I'm going to talk about that I like and some that I'm not so fond of. Starting with my written or texting verbal communication. So I like to send texts, especially with a lot of exclamation points and smiley faces, really to avoid sounding passive or uninterested. And my emotions often come off in this way. When I speak, they come off through my inflection. So when I type, I try to translate that inflection into punctuation marks and other emojis. I know that in our textbook, it generally defines written communication as more formal and spoken communication is more informal, but that there are exceptions, and I like to think I'm one of those exceptions. I also like to think that people really appreciate this about me. This conscious effort I have to really never seem like I'm sending subliminal messages, I've been told that people appreciate it and that it feels like they're more authentically talking to me, even though we're through that barrier of a phone. The next point I want to bring up is that I use a lot of words when I speak, as you can probably tell. And yes, they are almost always following syntactic rules for sentence structures, but people can most certainly get lost along the way. And I think that people who aren't close to me can either get really overwhelmed or really intrigued depending on what I'm discussing, whereas people who do know me probably get frustrated when I ramble on, but are pretty good sports about it and usually tell me that it makes me sound intelligent, so I'll take it. Moving on to nonverbal communication tendencies, I'm going to start talking about haptics now, otherwise the study of touch, as we also talk about it. So I'm really touchy when I'm interested in someone, whether that's platonically or romantically. I'm also very touchy when I want to show I care about someone, so that can be conveyed through a hug or a shoulder pat, something like that, to really show that I care and I'm listening and I'm connecting. And so, as explained in the textbook, Western society places a very high value on personal space, and I don't necessarily. So with that in mind, my touchiness is conscious. I do it intentionally to show I care, but some people don't receive it that way. Some people are not comfortable being touched like that. So I understand why it can be kind of off-putting, but that's how I am. On the other side, proxemics, that is how our space influences the way we relate with others, I really keep my distance when I'm not interested in people. I even cross my arms a lot of the time, and I'm not fully aware of this, but nonetheless, it's very telling, and I'm sure people can sense that I'm not interested, right? Especially because they probably just saw me hugging someone else, and now I'm standing this far from them. The other point I wanted to make about my nonverbals is that I use nonverbal communication to express emotion a lot of the time. I'm clearly very talkative, as I mentioned, but when I'm sad or really anxious, I tend to become very nonverbal. I've been told I stare off, absolutely no eye contact, which is very telling for me. I shake my leg a little, and I make myself very small. And I think that people who don't know me are probably very off-put by this. They think I'm really not interested in what they have to say, but people who know me can usually tell I'm upset, as it's a function of my nonverbal communication skills. In other words, my loved ones can tell that because I'm silent, there's something wrong, and they will usually approach me, and they can tell I'm really in my head, so it can be an indicator for them. In terms of what I would like to work on, as far as my verbal communication goes, I'd like to more effectively communicate with regard to my wordiness. I personally enjoy rambling on and on and on. It's kind of a pastime of mine, but I think that our discussion in class about using concise language made me realize that I really do demand more of my listeners if I use more words. And I think that this will never really change when I'm with my loved ones, and that's just something they'll have to accept. But in more public settings where I'm really trying to get a point across or talk about something that I really want people to understand, I would like to work more on my concise language, definitely. Now, in terms of nonverbal communication, the tendency I have to express hard emotions nonverbally is something I'd really like to practice more effectively. I'd like to learn how to communicate verbally when I'm having a hard time, ideally, but we all know that's easier said than done, right? It can be really hard to be vulnerable with people and to really express what we need in that moment. So for now, at the very least, I'd like to work on my eye contact with people. That way, when I'm upset, I can look them in the eye and they won't have to work so hard to figure out that I'm upset, and I won't have as much time to sit there in my head and spiral. I'll be able to connect with someone directly through eye contact and show them that I need something, and hopefully one day translate that into verbal communication. Thank you for watching.